Simon O'Connor from Family First joins us via Zoom today. Simon, kia ora, nice to see you again.
And great to see you. For those who are going to be watching this on TV and YouTube, it's going to be obvious. Andrew and I are wearing basically blue shirts and blue blazers. It's as if you and I text in the morning to choreography together.
Yeah, this is our school uniform. And honestly, no pressure, Simon, but when we were last chatting, it was in the Rhema studio. That seemed to go off on YouTube, so let's see if that was a fluke or whether you can continue that momentum. But looking at the topic of today, I know there's been a lot of concern about ideological capture within various aspects of society, particularly focusing today on some areas of government influence and control, the health and education sector. However, it seems, maybe I'm naive, but it seems that there's a little bit of pushback on this, perhaps removing gender ideology from both the health and education sector. Am I too optimistic, Simon?
I think the pushback is starting. I think we can be optimistic. There is a lot of pushback on the gender ideology, obviously, around what terms are used, what's being taught to our children.
Yep.
But it's very much early days. But I'd put it this way, Andrew, we can take encouragement not only of the decisions being made currently, but we can see what's happening around the globe, be it Australia, America, the UK. There is actually a bigger pushback. So yes, we can be optimistic, but I suspect it's going to be slow here in New Zealand.
Let's start with education. The RSE, the Relationship and Sex Education Guidelines. It's been a long time since these were reviewed, as it were. And now a lot of parents would be shocked and appalled by some of the things taught to young people in high schools. But then again, some parents would say, well, don't talk to them about it. It'll just encourage them. Let's have no sex education in our schools. So a variety of different views on this one. But when it comes to the review, talk to us about what's happening there. Are there some positive signs?
There are. So the coalition government, part of the agreement, particularly through New Zealand First, was that these RSE guidelines, so again, the sex education that we think of as older ones in schools, was to be reviewed because long and short, Andrew, highly radicalized, sexualized gender ideology was being taught in schools, explicit material that's just not age appropriate. And Family First has actually been calling this out for years. So we're pleased that there's been a review. The ministry actually dropped its new guidelines very quietly last week, which I always find as a former politician is very telling.
Yep.
If there's no fanfare, no press release, they're usually trying to hide something or they don't quite agree. But the new guidelines are much better, but they're not great. On the better side, they certainly acknowledge that there's a need for age appropriateness. They're certainly stressing the importance of parental involvement. They even say that biological sex is real. So there's good aspects there, but there still remain a number of red flags. There's still a lot of that gender ideology language in play, so like inclusion and diversity. And one level, Andrew, these are good words, but in these contexts they can be misused. And I suppose the encouragement, and I hope I won't repeat myself too often today, but it's really for parents, just keep an eye on what is being taught to your children.
Yep.
In schools, because
Is it a case though that we need for this to have a proper impact? We don't want it to be a reactional pendulum swing. For the tide to go in and the tide to come out, will have a true, I suppose, impact or influence on society rather than one side pushing back and then we have the reverse pendulum swing next time. All that adds to is the confusion of our young people.
Yeah, there's no pendulum swing here other than we've gone way out on one side with a lot of this quite extreme progressive views, identity politics driven sex education for our children,
Yep.
as I say. And we've got the evidence. You can jump onto our website, sexually explicit material being taught to primary students. So very destructive. This is a pullback a little way. It is definitely not definitely not a pendulum swing.
That's my point, Simon. Perhaps this is more helpful than a pendulum swing. That a full pendulum swing would perhaps not stick as well as saying, well, actually, let's move back to some middle ground. Perhaps it's not as far as everybody wants it to be. But I know for some people listening to this, their response would be sex education. Here's how some people do it. Now don't do it. Some people would
Yeah.
want a very prudish version of sex and relationship education. And there'll be a variety of views on this one. Perhaps middle ground is better than a full swing in the opposite direction.
Yeah, it's definitely not a full swing in the opposite direction. I'd still argue we're not quite on a middle ground, but it is better. As I say, the document, and parents or anyone has a chance, I think it's up to May 9th to have their say. It's up for consultation.
Yep.
There's still a lot there which could allow activist teachers or activist groups to still come in and distort, I think, what is healthy, sex and sexuality education. I think the fundamental point, Andrew, is parents need to be aware of what is being taught in their schools. And the Ministry of Education, to me, appears to be trying to push actually parents out of the equation. One of the biggest red flags, and the minister sadly was repeating it herself, that schools find it frustrating to consult parents and have to talk to parents about the sex education of their children.
Wow.
They would just like one single defined curriculum with no parental input. And I think that should be a huge red light to all
There's a
and
huge
everyone.
red
Hey,
flag.
we want to talk about this.
Exactly, and in all other areas of curriculum, it's all about school and parent partnership, but not on this one. No, the parents aren't trusted to be involved with this. And actually, there is the opportunity, if parents are concerned about what is happening in the school curriculum in this or any other area, they can have their say. They can meet with staff and the board. They can volunteer and sign up to be a member of their local board. There is every opportunity for parents to lean in where they're concerned in this area.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, they're our children. They're not the school's children.
Yep.
They're not the state's children. They're our children. And so, yeah, again, I know I'm sounding a bit like a cracked record, but that's probably family first encouragement to parents is, these new guidelines are better than the previous ones. But it behoves, all who are parents just to keep an eye on what is happening and to speak up and, of course, to pull the child out, if you will. That importantly remains there. We would, at Family First, much more prefer to see an opt-in system. In other words, you have to choose to put your child in. But, at the moment, that's not the case. And the other really, really quick point, the document talks a lot about confidentiality. Between a particular teacher and student. And again, it's a bit of a red flag. I mean, what do they want to be keeping confidential from parents? So again, just some things to flag there.
The opportunity, though, and perhaps the situation has come about because generally parents have abdicated out of this. They're saying, oh, look, this is just so awkward and embarrassing. I don't want to have the talk. I don't want to talk with my children about their sexuality. This is the last thing I want to do. Let the schools do that. That actually parents have dropped the ball on this one. Not all parents, of course, but perhaps too many of them have said, look, I don't want to have the awkward conversation. Again, an opportunity to step up on this one, perhaps.
Oh, look, absolutely. In a strange way, the more difficult a conversation is, the more important for the parent or parents to lead it. If we as parents, or in my case, a step parent, are not talking into our children. It doesn't matter if it's on sex education, on perspectives on the political view of the world, on the cultural view of the world, on our faith. If we're not talking into it, we're leaving it up to others. And do we really trust all these others, particularly those captured by the likes of gender ideology, to be guiding our children? The answer is no.
Yeah. The other area that I wanted to touch on is the health sector and gender ideology and what is described by some as gender-affirming care, seen as just another health procedure. Again, there's a little bit of pushback in this and some changes of terminology within the health sector. I suspect, Simon, that you don't think that it's swung back enough in a certain direction, but a similar process here?
Yeah, so the context of this will be that the Associate Minister of Health, I think a day or two ago, Casey Costello, directed Health New Zealand to talk about pregnant women.
Yep.
That was her explicit direction to them. She was sick of calling them birthers, I think, or women with certain, always conscious these are family shows, describing women by their body parts, or talking about pregnant people. And she said, enough of that, they're pregnant women, only women get pregnant. And look, that is good. Look, fundamentally, Andrew, we either have an empirical world that we can observe and describe, which is where we have pregnant women, or we have a world just based on people's beliefs, which are wide, varied, confusing. And you cannot, I think, base a civil society on belief, and you can't against what is empirical reality. In fact, I think your viewers and listeners should be very concerned that many in our health ministry are captured so much by gender ideology that they cannot even speak into biological reality.
This is part of the problem, though, because it's one thing for a politician to say, hey, let's talk about this and not that. But actually, a politician to have a certain view is different than what is the view, what is the practice within the medical community. I imagine that some of this ideology will continue, perhaps less overtly, but continue nonetheless.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Look, the Ministry of Health, by and large, is captured by these ideologues. This is where enormous amounts of time and effort go. Just look at the delays around the questions of puberty blockers here in New Zealand. New Zealand continues to dither around an issue which actually across the globe is being confronted strongly and squarely. In fact, only a few days ago, an Australian federal court has slammed gender-affirming care, calling out its doctors as putting ideology over medicine, of misleading the court, effectively lying to the court. It's just damning, absolutely damning, just like the Cass review was in the UK. So New Zealand's often behind in these things because there's too much ideological capture.
Yeah. Well, hey, appreciate your views and comments on this. And hey, nice to be talking about some good news, well, at least tentatively optimistic good news as we head towards the Easter season. Of course, more on this at familyfirst.org.nz. Simon, thanks for what you do. Thanks for joining us.
Andrew, a pleasure, and happy Easter.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.